Good afternoon, good morning, good day, whenever you're watching us. You are tuned in to the Vigilate Dialogues. I am your host, Shaina Smith, welcoming you to the National Boardroom. If this is your first time, just as a point of information, Vigilate, it is the national motto of the Virgin Islands. And here in this boardroom, we like to talk about issues affecting our quality of life and more importantly, about the solutions affecting it. So we basically talk about everything. And nothing's, everything is fair game. With me tonight, I have some guests that I'm really looking forward to this conversation about our Virgin Islands diaspora. And just to let those that are listening by radio, the Vigilante Dialogues is played live on Thursdays, 7:30 p.m. on YouTube and Facebook Live. So be sure to go on and like the Facebook page as well as subscribe to the channel. And you play, share, whatever it is. So our topic tonight is the Virgin Islands diaspora. And I know this is probably something new for a couple persons in terms of what is a diaspora. But I decided that a good idea would be to bring in the diaspora to have this conversation. So I have a few friends and family with us tonight to share their thoughts about, the topic of what it means to be a Virgin Islander living abroad and sharing thoughts about what's happening at home and how they like to see things develop. So without any further ado, I'm going to go around the room and ask them to introduce themselves. When we were promoting it, we had 3 guests and we added one more. So we have Mr. Archer joining us tonight. So this is going to be fun. All right. So starting with you, Miss Angelle, go ahead. Let us know who you are, where you are, and how long you've been there as a start.
Okay, I do have to say to the other guests, excuse me, I may have technical difficulties. My laptop is a bit loud. But as Shaina said, I'm Angelle Frett. I'm from Eastern Tortola. And I came to the UK when I was 16 to boarding school, actually, to do my A-levels. But now I'm in university and I'm now finishing my 3rd year. I'm studying media, communications, and culture. So I've been here since 2017, right before the hurricanes.
Okay, great. All right, Mr. Reimer.
My name is Gary Reimer. I hail from the 2nd District, so just Hill, King Gadenby area. I've been in Atlanta since actually came here for college back in 92. And actually I've been in Atlanta, Georgia since that time. I go home often, at least once or twice a year. With the pandemic, I haven't been able to go home as often as I can as well. One of the things, I think this is a great topic as well, too, just because of additional things I see going on back home and kind of people who live outside of the BVI who want to contribute, whether it be from services or skill set to back home. I also host a podcast that I started probably like a year ago called BVI Buzz, kind of touching similar topics, politics, economics, technology, kind of surrounding issues around the BVI. So I'm happy to join this panel tonight.
Awesome. Yes, and we're no strangers. So you're returning the favor now because I think I was on your show last year.
You were, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
It was last year. So I'm returning the favor. And my new friend, I'm actually meeting Miss Foy for the first time. So I'm gonna ask you to go ahead and introduce yourselves to us.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Claudette Foy. I actually was born in St. Thomas. My parents are from Tortola, Virgie Stout Foy, and also James Alonzo Foy from Foy Hill, from Bellevue, I guess you would call it. And I was born in St. Thomas, came to New York in 1975 at the age of 13, and I have been here ever since, and always been interested in the BVI, always been interested in Tortola. Spent some years there over the summer, during the summer vacation, and really loved it, have a passion for it. And I'm so happy to be a part of the dialogue now, which I've always wanted to do for many, many years. I just didn't have an avenue of how to enter in. So I'm actually a registered nurse. I work in a hospital here in New York. I live in Staten Island, New York, and just happy to be a part of the program tonight.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. You were one of the first people that responded when I put out the call for persons in the diaspora. So I really appreciate your promptness. And the late comer, but I'm saving the best for last. We just had a conversation this afternoon, and I said, why not join our conversation today? You do live in the diaspora, and let's hear your thoughts. So, Mr. Archer, please introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Will Archer, Shaina's husband. I've been in Florida since about 2004. And I'm happy to be a part of this panel where I can contribute whatever I can to make things better. Definitely want to be a part of that, definitely. Nice to meet everyone.
All right. All right, guys. So I sent you some discussion points to kind of guide, what we chat about tonight. And one of the key things for me was, as it relates to first educating ourselves more about what diaspora means. And Gary and I almost had the show last night because we were, going back and forth talking about some of the things and what it means, because some Caribbean countries or other Caribbean countries we see make a very intentional effort or very expressive when it comes to engaging their basically their nationals that live abroad. So for example, you'll hear in speeches, let's say maybe in Barbados, they talk about Barbadians home and abroad, and that's it, because it's whether you're home or abroad, you're a Barbadian, and they consider that. You hear that a lot too in terms of with Jamaica. Again, persons expressing that regardless of where you are, you're still part of us. You're still part of the group. So, just in terms of a definition, diaspora just is basically saying, a group of persons that live abroad from what would be considered their homeland or their country of origin, right? And we know migration in the Caribbean is something that's as old as time. People have always been moving around the earth. And for us, our diaspora started moving out probably in the 50s and 60s when there weren't any job opportunities here locally. And being whether they was in St. Thomas or as far as Panama, I understand that our men, went out to look for work and basically either stay there for years and, send money back home, or they actually were there for months out of the year. For example, in Santo Domingo, they would go to the sugarcane plantations, work for 6 months, and then come back home and be home for 6 months. So it's something that movement of people has always been occurring. So as time progressed now, more of us went abroad for school. And, eventually some stayed for work opportunities, or in the case of Ms. Claudette, you were already abroad in terms of your parents were already there. So, you continued out there, but have always had a keen interest in terms of what's happening at home. So it struck me, in a conversation in terms of, again, how are we engaging all Virgin Islanders in the development of our country? And that it not just be about following the news, because I have family, I have relatives that know what's happening in the news here before I do, because they faithfully, they read the online news and tracking, what's happening in the country. And would call and say, what's happening there or whatever, or ask questions. So what in terms of, I guess, you've all given the reasons in terms of why you are abroad and that you still love home. This is still home for you, which I'm happy to hear. And that's a good thing. But what do you think in terms of, for those that don't have that kind of interest, we'll start there. What do you think needs to be done to engage the diaspora more? And why is it important? I'll start with Gary.
So I think it's important. I think one of the things that we kind of need is for people who are away from home, living abroad, is kind of making sure that we still have a connection, whether that be to culture, family, some kind of connection that would want to keep them engaged into the development of the professionals back home. As I said before, I think sometimes that people back home sometimes feel frustrated against people who have left, and they feel, well, you've gone away, you've left us. There's no way that you can contribute, or they feel a certain way sometimes that you've gone away, that you don't want to come back, or people who have gone away can't voice their opinion on the development of the country because in their minds you're not physically living there anymore. So your voice is a little less than mine because I'm living here experiencing. So what you have to say, some people feel a little less because you're not here anymore. But I feel that there needs to be somewhere where people who've moved away, some kind of connection that would draw them back for those that don't feel that they're able to give connection. And I think sometimes too, people would want to contribute, whether it be talent, but they don't know even where to start, or how do I get connected? How do I get plugged in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's definitely a sentiment that we hear all the time. Angelle, what are your thoughts in terms of you? I'm assuming you're planning to move home, but let me ask that question first. In terms of, are you planning to move back home? Because I know sometimes we have a plan and saying, well, we're gonna go abroad, come back, and make our contribution home. But then sometimes we see opportunity there and decide to either delay it or basically postpone it. What are your thoughts?
My plan right now is to delay it, like you just mentioned. I have all intention to come home at some point. I love home, but it's not going to be immediately after I finish school, and that's just because I see a lot more opportunity here, a lot more room to grow. But as Gary was saying, it has been something of interest for me to look into how I can contribute from where I'm at. So, connecting with you, Shane, has been a big part of that, working on different projects with you, and connecting with the BDL and the house out here and listening to the different opportunities available just to be able to connect, with people from home or like with different opportunities to be able to, as you would say, help in the development of the country, whatever little part I can do. I always have my ear out for those kinds of things. In terms of basically incentivizing people to come home, I think we need more opportunity for people, I was going to say my age, but for anyone, you need opportunity, and you need a sense of community. Looking at the media surrounding, things happening at home, it feels very divided sometimes, and it seems like when there's disaster, that's when, the community spirit is all high and, out there. But I think we need something to rally around. I used to be very prideful about, like our beautiful beaches and like, sorry, computer issues. Beaches and the sand and the blue sky and all those things, but it's not enough anymore.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very tight knitted family with a lot of that culture and the stories, and outside of my family I don't really see that or feel it. So for me personally, a connection to my community and opportunity to expand and grow would definitely help, I think.
To do that. Okay. Awesome. All right, Mr. Archer.
I think that I would love to come back and be a part of helping the country to grow by all means. But again, we got to start looking at what's there and where we're going with it, because as far as what's there, we have to help what's there grow as well. Because if you look around right now, you have a lot of situation where it's nothing to do. It's nothing to do for the kids. It's nothing to do for the adults. So then we find ourselves falling in these strange places where we do the wrong things that don't actually help us grow by no means. So you could look around, look at the news, you could see how far we're falling behind because of not having anything for who's there, much less who's trying to come back and make it grow. So we first of all have to find things to contribute to those who are there to begin with, so we could come back and contribute to what's there already. Is not a whole lot that's there that we can contribute to. I mean, after you've been away, you're on the outside looking in. It's kind of empty.
Yeah. So your concern is about lack of progress in your
Yes.
mind. Yeah. Okay.
Basically with what we have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to develop nothing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So, Miss Claudette, I think you have a very unique perspective. I don't know, at any point did you live in the Virgin Islands?
I grew up, I think, in my younger years, I spent
Mhm.
some time in Tortola.
Okay.
So I do have an attachment to the culture, because I remember my uncle lived down Fat Hawks Bay, and he would get the shellfish and we would roast it. I remember
Mm-hmm.
roast peanut, all those things I would love to have if I come back. I mean, that's just, that's just the culture that I remembered. Going in Greenland, picking soursop, sugar apple. You know what I'm. So I've been there.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
I have
So you would come up on
exposure.
like the breaks from school and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the breaks
Yeah,
from
on the
school.
holidays. Yeah.
So so for me, I there was an issue with the, as Gary said, the community, the connection, and I found that connection through Virgin Island Communal Association, and I've clung to it because
Mm-hmm.
of that. Because I really, just like many family members, you look at the news, but you really don't have perspective
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what's going on there. But people do live there. As we talk later about different issues, I have over the years heard different types of issues expressed, concerns about the people that are on the island, about the progress and the things that are going on. But I think for the diaspora, that I would like to see
Mm-hmm.
is a greater connection to us, so that there's a place that you can go. And I'm hoping Vica will be one of those places where you can actually go for information. I know there are a couple of sites I've seen some
Yeah.
sites, but you know, and also education. There are a lot of us here who have family members. If we have a connection, then we could pull them in.
Mm-hmm.
But to get them interested, a lot of them uh, don't have maybe parents back there, so they may be third or fourth generation.
Yeah.
Also, a lot may feel that, well, as Gary was saying, what's the progress? There's been a lot of progress, but that they're feeling, when you come to larger countries and then you look back at an island, we here in the diaspora have to understand that it's a slower pace. You just have to accept that. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
same as if you're in a big New York City. You can't have the same comparison.
Yeah.
So I think it's just those, like what you are doing here. It's opening up the communications with us, so
Mm-hmm.
that we can become familiar with each other again. I think
Okay.
that's what is missing. That connection is, and thank God for the pandemic and all this, is because we're using these forums, and I'm
yeah,
so happy about that. So I think it's just having more of these conversations, using these forums to really connect with those who are interested, and so that
Mm-hmm.
they can bring others in as well to say, yes, something is happening, you should be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
and that's definitely a sentiment that a lot of persons that I've spoken to, whether it's family friends that have gone. One of my brothers a younger brother. You know, both of us went off to college around the same time, but you know, he's decided to stay in Florida for a bit longer and make his life there, and that's okay too. You know, but you know, traveling home, taking an interest in home, still supporting what's happening is very key. Well, okay, so let's get into like kind of the current affairs stuff because I'm really interested to hear, you know, the different perspectives around what's been happening at home. And I guess the biggest event that basically in my mind sucked the air out of the room was the commission of inquiry that was announced in January of this year. And as we all know, the public hearings concluded this month, I think it was, or the last week of November. So now the commission is preparing their report, and we're expecting that it will be presented to the governor next month, because I believe that was what was outlined in the extension. Because remember, when it was first announced, it was supposed to be for 6 months, which would have mean it would have been completed by summer, and it was extended beyond that. So, you know, I don't know who wants to go first. and you know, share a bit about your thoughts. Have you been tuning in and watching what's going on? And what do you think is the impact or the implications on our community with something like this? Gary, I'm going to pick on you.
I was trying to unmute my mic. So yeah, I've been following it very closely because I'm very into politics, economics, and development of the BVI. So I actually did a episode of this on my podcast talking about this kind of like who's to blame, because you talk to a lot of different people, you hear a lot of people throwing blame of who actually started this this commission of inquiry, whether it started from the government, the governor, etc. But I think one of the things that I talked about on the podcast was that I think from this commission of inquiry, one of the things that I see is that if we had foundations in place already, or different things that kind of covered our transparency, like for example, the Freedom of Information Acts, the all those kind of things that we've tabled for years, that as far as a structure in place and transparency, I think a lot of this would not have been where it is right now. I think one of the things that people feel locally that I've talked to is that some people want it just because of their thoughts about how they feel government, not just present government, but just government in general, operated, and feeling a lack of transparency. And they're feeling that this is going to help them get transparency, which could be good and bad in some instances, because be careful what you ask for, because you can get you can get them to help you with that, but at the same time too, you don't want to get too overboard where they say, well, we don't feel like you're managing your affairs the best that you can, so we'll come in and take over for you.
Yeah.
So we don't want to get too far into that realm. But I think at some point we need to develop areas where we have structures in place from the economic governmental point of view that will actually have these things in place where we won't even have to go down this road.
Yeah, and that's very key. All right, so I'm not going to try and comment. Mr. Archer, have you been following the public hearings and all the stories, the news stories that have been coming out of our Commission of Inquiry? What's your thoughts on the impact on the community?
Yes, I agree with Gary in a lot of different ways. But it all boils down to having love for your country. When you have love for something, you tend to not treat it a certain way. So no one wouldn't have to actually come in and tell you how to treat it, because you looking out for the best interest of that thing that you love. So I think it is a mere situation where we have to start loving what we have, and we have something that could take us into generations on top of generations, but we have to do the right things by it. In which we seem like we was not doing, otherwise we would not have this inquiry going on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Angelle, you've been busy in the books, or you caught a few of the hearings?
I caught a few of the news reports, none of the hearings. So I don't have much insight. Sorry, I don't have much insight into what's been happening. It's almost like it's almost like it's been an entertainment segment based on what I've heard from other people. So I'm really just waiting to see what the report finds.
Okay. So in terms of conversations with family or friends, what has been like, I guess, the impact you think that it has on us? Because I think Gary mentioned about how it's kind of created two camps. Some people were saying this is a good thing for us, and the UK needs to come in and put us, I guess, set things straight or put us in check, as it were.
I think no matter what camp you're in, so to speak, a lot of people are caught up in the drama of it all. I think that it's a major story. And people run off with the different, storylines about it. Like you were saying, there's the victim, and then there's the villain, and all these things. I don't think that too many people have actually grasped the depth of the situation, or have seriously considered the implications or the possible ways forward. I don't think I've heard too many of those conversations. I know in speaking to you, I've heard you speak on a few solutions and a few other people, but not too many. I think everyone's caught up in the hype.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Miss Claudette, I know you follow things here on a microscope.
Yes, I did. I followed the seed commissioner inquiry. Yes, I did. What was interesting to me is, and I think which was good, is that people actually got a view of how things ran. And I think that was really an eye-opener and important for the constituency to really understand. A lot of what I, got concerned about, as Angela was saying, is that there was no path forward, or even if you're understanding, having the context. We got content. We got a lot of content. What we didn't get was context. I want to know, when a decision is made by the cabinet, how is that made? What kind of information they have sitting in front of them at the time they make? Because all of that information comes up the ranks before it gets to them and is filtered out.
Yeah.
So they are only getting a segment of information that the people below them think is important for them to get to make these decisions. So I think to really move forward, we really need to get a better understanding from the grassroots, or the bottom level of the organization, how things really function. We only knew at the point of, because I listened to it. I listened to the ministers, I listened to the permanent secretaries, but there seemed to be so much more background information on how a decision is made. And I don't think the public really got to understand that. They only got, as she said, the sensationalism. And since it was an inquiry, it was really tailored a certain way. The questions, even the commissioner and the attorney were, tailoring the conversations in a certain direction to gain a certain outcome. And this is why some people felt that they were in there nefariously to try to get, that's why the whole thing came out of them, oh, they want to take us over. Because their, line of questioning and how they presented their arguments, or the information they wanted to garner and also to send out to the public, is that you have these people that are just, as Gary was saying, don't care about the country. And, I don't know if that's what I got. I just got a whole bunch of public servants or elected officials who needed better systems to work through. Now, a lot of people on the ground may not, agree with me because they're there. But what I'm saying, if you have a system of a tender process, because that was a big thing that was going on and on and on, and you have such a rigid structure, and people are trying to find out how to do business inside of this structure that you have, at some point, who says maybe we need to look at the structure? If we have to keep tinkering with the structure, which person is going to actually come and say, don't keep tinkering with the structure or pushing it aside to do what you want. It needs revision. So what I got from that that whole, and it was the drama about that whole process, is that I'm just thinking that systems, policies, and these things really need to be revisited and looked at in terms of our culture, because that was the other the thing that I heard through the COI. This is the way we do business here. Is it wrong? You know, I mean, I can accuse anyone of giving a contract to their family members, but who's not related in our community for the most part, you know, or who are not friends. So what I'm saying, we have to, you know, we got the drama, as Angela was saying, we got all these things, but what I got out of it is that, one, we really need to take a step back as a public. Now we've seen, and how do we work with the government to get, we have no analytics. I guess what I'm looking at is there are no analytics. Like,
The data.
okay, you made all, right, you have the data, you made these decisions. What was the context? That's my whole thing, is how did these things come, and what is the analysis? If you're having to waive a tender process for 40 or 50 years, something is wrong. When are we going to look at the system to see, does this system work for us? The system may work in the UK, the system may work in the US, the system may work in a bigger economy, but does the system work for the BVI? The way we are structured, the way culturally we work.
Yeah.
And so that's what basically I took away from there, is that, one, there needs to be some objectivity in terms of, you know, objective data, because if I'm hungry, I'm not going to be objective. If I need a job, I am not going to be objective. Don't tell me about a tender process or whatever, because to me, you're giving you're giving the job away to this one and that one. Why don't I have it? And so on a personal level, okay, that's the way I would look at it. I think as Angel was saying, versus from an objective, how do we structure the country? How do we structure our laws? How do we structure the policies of how our agencies work?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I would.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to agree with you that, you know, having worked on the ground, worked in the Ministry of Finance, there is some systemic reform that needs to happen. And we have been kicking the can down the road for a very long time. So your observations from New York City are very accurate, ma'am. And you're right. I think the context part of it is also important. It's as if to say this was like a reality TV show, and you know, you have a season and then everybody goes back to their regular life. But for us now, governance is a daily thing, because again, the decisions that are being made in the cabinet every week is affecting us as citizens of the country. So further education is definitely needed as it relates to persons understanding how the country is actually run. You know, we had the word good governance for the last 12 months. But exactly what that means, like you're saying, what is the mechanics of all of this in terms of how the engine actually turns over, is part of what needs to be told, so that we can also understand when it comes to troubleshooting, so to speak, because the recommendations will come, and you know, we shouldn't take it at face value and say, well, because the Commission of Inquiry say we should do this, that we should go and do it. You know, that we're able to also critically think about what it is being proposed, and if it makes sense, okay, fine, it makes sense, because that's going to progress us, because that's what we open talking about. We want to see progress in our country. I know for me, the Commission of Inquiry, again, how it came about with all of the political rancor, I would say, you know, I wasn't too keen on that. I think it gave us a very bruised black eye in the international sphere, because there was a lot of international publicity driven by the UK around it. But again, this is not the first Commission of Inquiry in any of their overseas territories. So it's something that even the fact that you have to keep bringing these things says something to me about the administering power country. But, you know, that's another show, Gary. And what their role is in the governance of their OT. So we're going to wait. We're going to actually reconvene the boardroom when the report comes out and analyze, you know, what comes forward. and see where we go from there in terms of, you know, what the outcomes. Because I know I have a few friends that are like, you know, we need to start planning now. We need to plan for what we think may be the recommendations, whether it's as extreme as takeover or just, you know, replacing persons in this public service, or in terms of around financial management and those types of things. So it's going to be very interesting. So the next, I guess, hot topic of this year that was kind of running alongside this was, in the previous year, the government had announced about wanting to conduct a constitutional review. And the conversation now about self-governance, decolonization, self-determination, however we want to refer to it, came up again. And then, you know, the inquiry came and kind of sucked the air out of that whole conversation. But it is a very important conversation, and I especially believe too that, you know, the diaspora needs to weigh in on this. And you know, while we were here talking, guys, you know, I thought about the only time we intentionally engage the diaspora is elections. Think about it. That is the only time we really intentionally engage the diaspora, and family reunions. That's the only time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but those two things came to mind. It was like, you know, we do make a great effort around elections because it's about the political benefit, as it were. But apart from that, we're kind of saying, you know, we don't want to hear from persons who supposedly have a vested interest in the country. But, you know, you guys can chime in on that when you're commenting. But what are your thoughts about the constitutional review? Should we be thinking about self-governance, meaning, you know, whether it's independence, free association with the UK, which means we get more responsibility, but we're still connected, or integration into the kingdom? Because technically, as it stands right now, we are not a part of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is England, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. So it's always the UK and its territories, you know, so it's kind of like you're an appendage out there someplace floating. So yeah, what are your thoughts? Because this is a conversation, again, that's been happening for quite some time, couple decades maybe. The last constitutional review was in 2000, and I think it started probably back in 03 coming forward, but we actually had a new constitution enacted in 2007. So I don't know, Mr. Archer, you want to start?
For me, like I've been looking at it, and I've been thinking to myself, like, we need to do a lot of groundwork. We in desperate need of groundwork, because we can't build anything without a foundation, and we need so much work on our foundation. So we could not look at ourselves, but our offsprings and the people that's coming after us. And we also have to look at the people that was before us and what they were trying to do. Whether it's good or bad, then we have to make a decision in terms of what we want and what we want for all offsprings, because that will help us to determine in, like, who wants to move back home and what we're gonna move back home to do, which is very important, because you would have a lot of people going abroad and making money, something that is impossible to make at home with what we have right now. So we have to start putting our best foot forward and making things possible, as opposed to making things impossible based on our decisions that we're making for the country and for ourselves. Because it's tough to leave a well-paying job to come back to something that's not going to work. It wouldn't work for someone that is abroad making money, just making a career, a future for not only themselves, like I'm saying, but for your offspring. So it's a tough one that we have to start going ground deep and rerooting what we're trying to do, and making it work. We have to come up with solutions or ways to make it work for ourselves, because if we can't help ourselves, we can't help anyone else. So yes, it starts with us, and we have to start making some really big moves and some big solutions, because time is not on our side, not if we're making the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
Now is a good time.
So you're saying we should start thinking about it because it's in our future.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's important.
All right. Well, Angel, when we talk about decolonization and independence, it's really your future we're discussing. Because even if it takes us the next 10 years, again, like Will is saying, to lay the foundation, put the systems in place, because again, this is what the COI has evoked for a lot of people, that we're not ready, we can't do it. And I don't know, it's so much that we can't do it at some point. We definitely can't do it now because we're not ready. I agree with that part. But I do believe that at some point we have to look at self-governance and explore what that means to us, because we actually have enough latitude with the United Nations Declaration to create whatever the model is in terms of a relationship with the UK. So what are your thoughts around that?
I agree with what Mr. Archer was saying about the foundation. Even though what's being done is for my generation and younger, I personally feel like everyone involved needs to connect. I think that really needs to be an intricate network of the people interested or concerned helping. So for me, I always want to be able to try to contribute, even if it's like a post or speaking to someone or asking a question. But I really have no direction in terms of doing that. Like we have these conversations all the time, like what can I do? Who should I speak to? Things like that. And channels like these open up, those networks. But I feel like there are thousands of us outside the BVI and within the BVI asking the same questions, but we just need to connect. I think there are many solutions on the table, but they're not put out there in the general public. So I think one of the first things we can do is start forming those networks, because we talk about self-governance, but the whole governing thing, that's a lot more than just the government itself. I think that the people, we talk about holding the government accountable and stuff like that, but we ourselves are not organized in what we want, in the direction we want to go to. I just think that we need a lot more unity, and that starts with putting aside differences, and actually speaking and doing our small part. I think we like to point fingers at the government should do this and this person should do that, but I think we just need to figure out what our individual tasks are. And then
move from there. I totally agree, because I think for me, the unity of our community was, I should say the strength of it was definitely demonstrated with the whole vaccination. I wouldn't call it a fiasco, but it was definitely, and it wasn't so much about the rollout and all of that, it was how strongly people took a position about vaccination status, and if we took that kind of passion, Gary, and talk about self-governance and good governance, we'd be ready to go independent in 5 years.
Right. And I think a lot of people too, sometimes when you think about self-governance, people always go to the extreme and say, well, self-governance means independence as automatically. But I think sometimes there are ways that you can go in between. There are ways
and do it in stages, you mean?
Right. We don't have to go straight to independence as the self-governance rule, but create a path where eventually you want to get to independence, yes, but that shouldn't be the first path that you want to get to eventually. And I think people kind of get hung up on the independence path, that's the only way we can govern it ourselves. And it also goes back to what I said earlier too. I think a lot of this self-governance talk is we can't get there until we have these structures in place and these transparency. I go back to the whole transparency, freedom of information stuff. These are things that need to be in place before we can even talk about that. If Ms. Foy talked about she needs to find out about how tenders are work, she should be able to have a Freedom of Information Act, be able to query and say, I want to know how this contract was tendered. She have a right, but there's no mechanism in place today where me, you, Ms. Foy, or anybody here in this panel can go and get that information because we don't have the laws in place. And again,
Yeah.
go back to that again because the Freedom of Information Act, as I did it before, we've drafted it at least 12 years ago. Every government comes in place that they're going to pass it, they don't pass it. For whatever reason, they don't want to pass it. I can't tell you why, but because when you start doing freedom of information, you're opening the door to all kind of things that have happened in the past and in the future, which means if I do this particular contract with this company, Gary Reimer, Will Archer have the right to come and say, well, I open the books now. I need to see how this contract was signed. How was it tendered? And people are afraid of that. Why? If the best interest is for the country, these things should be no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And again, it goes back to systemic reform. Because I think it was this week I was sharing with someone that we inherited a system because at some point we weren't always in control and governing ourselves. This has happened especially in the last 70 years plus, right? So we need to now take stock and say, this system definitely needs to be improved. I see Claudette up here nodding her head.
Yeah, I am on that. I'm on that path because I think what happens is those who are elected, they come in and they are doing the process. But again, that stepping back and really being, like you said, the Freedom of Information Act comes, they may come in to the system and they may find some things there when they come in that they really don't want shown to the public. So, it's not that you're so hiding it, but you understand the people who we understand our people. You understand the people who you're working with. And something may seem, out of place that really may not be so. Again, I bring that context. So, but going back to the foundation and self-governance, one of my main concerns would be security, national security. Are we able to protect our borders? Someone that I was speaking to here kept mentioning the fact that when Hurricane Irma came in and the prisoners got out, it took the UK to come in to go through the bushes or wherever they were to capture them. And these were some hardened criminals that were among our community. And we had no idea where they were, but we needed that outside help. So I think that is one of the main areas that we should be considering when we are looking at self-governance. And in my opinion, self-governance really should be not so much independence, but having more autonomy in what we do, more autonomy. So I think we need to define that self-governance. What does it really mean for us?
Yeah.
As you're saying, are we really saying that we want to become a republic, like Barbados? Or are we saying in 5 years, we would like more freedom of how we do things, so that we can be more of a free association, so that there are certain things that we rely on the UK for, but our internal, how we deal with our finances, how we deal with our industries,
foreign
we
affairs,
would want more.
One of the big things,
we would want more say in how that's done. And as someone was saying, the archaic systems that are currently in place that were formed off of the UK or British system, those foundational, not only the transparency, but really you can have a constitutional review and we can have policies and all of these things in place, but they have to be executed. And I think that's the part that, we kind of move away from. And I think when we had a conversation while someone, we had a forum from a Diaspora forum, another one, my thing is that when we are doing all of the constitutional reviews and putting all these structures in place, we also need to be working on ourselves, meaning that we have to have certain tenets. We have to have, in order to have transparency, you have to be able to be open and be open to criticism.
Yeah.
You know, I actually pastor a church, and I tell my congregants, I said, criticize me. Some people in leadership, they don't want to be criticized. You have to be criticized. You have to go through these processes, and as
feedback.
you need feedback. So yeah, you need feedback. So in terms of a constitutional review, in terms of having some path to self-determination or self-governance or whatever you want to define that as, one of the things our leaders have to be willing to be open and willing to allow criticism, willing to allow people to express themselves. Other than that, you're making decisions in silo. We have this group that's making the decisions for the country, and we want you to stay out. It cannot work that way. So I think, as Gary is saying, pushing that for the freedom of information law is one thing, but also the systemic reforms, really looking at how things are structured, how they work in an emergency. Can you really do a tender? I'm back to that because that thing was, through the COI. Can you really put all those things in place in an emergency? Can you really contract with people and go through that whole bureaucratic process? So even in our emergency systems, we don't allow, so you have an internal or external auditor comes in, they're going to say, you didn't follow the system. But could we follow the system when there's an emergency? Just like Mr. Archer is saying, our systems are not set up so that sometimes so that the government can govern.
Yeah.
Because if I have to go through all these processes, I think I was looking at one event in a House Assembly or something where Mr. Vanterpool, Honorable Vanterpool, said the governor himself came to him after Irma and said, "Open up your shop. We need to give people food." And did he go through a tender? Did he go through? He said, "I have a contract with the government." And if you look at that example, you would say that I did not follow the process.
Yeah.
So how do we, even in our emergency management, how do we? How do we?
Yeah, but
need to look at all of those things.
That's an important point you raised indirectly, that you have to have a plan for normal circumstances, but you also need to have a plan for emergency response. Not wait till emergency hits and then we realize this does not move as fast as we need it to, or as quickly as we need the turnaround. So we have to, again, the planning is so necessary for us to move our country forward. And I'm going to end on that note and then open it up for you guys to express any other topic in terms of one thing you saw this year that you want to see, I guess, different in next year, or something that you want to see in next year that you haven't seen dealt with this year. Because I'm promising you guys from now, whether it's you or other persons out in the diaspora, I am definitely going to open up this platform as a way for us to start to build that conversation, so that, again, we're engaging. Because I listen to the governor, the USVI governor, talk all the time, and he starts off Virgin Islanders, home and abroad, and it's time we start to speak like that. And again, not only for election and and family reunions that we're looking. So, Claudette, since you're up, we had 2 new public holidays that we celebrated this year around our history and heritage. I was ecstatic. I really want to see more happening in the coming years in terms of how we educate and raise awareness amongst ourselves about our history and heritage. But I don't know if you are aware of them. Heroes and Forefathers Day was in November, and then the commemoration of the reinstatement of the Legislative Council.
Yes, I looked at both.
The both of them. What are your thoughts around that, and around about how we recognize our I don't like to say history anymore, I mean culture anymore, because that's kind of like just scratching the surface on this thing. Our history and our heritage is really what we have to start to learn, as my husband said, love and appreciate. Because if you love a thing, he's right, you will treat it differently. It's not going to be something that you discard or abuse, but that you actually take care of.
Well, I think one positive thing that I'm seeing is that they're beginning to put that type of information into school, which is very important. You have a lot of times, we are looking at someone else's history. Even here in America, we're always looking at someone else's history. We don't celebrate ourselves. We don't see our heroes. We don't see people like ourselves. They're Virgin Islanders. What I would love to see is there's so many Virgin Islanders that have been abroad, that have done great things in the United States and UK and other places. And I would love to begin to even see them. We had an ambassador, I think it was like a Todman or something like that, an ambassador.
Uncle Terrence Todman, U.S.
How
ambassador.
How many people know about? That's what I'm saying. How many people?
Yeah.
I just, I look up these things. So I think one of the things that would help connect the diaspora to the mainland is to really begin to not only acknowledge those who have done a lot to bring the BVI forward, but for those who are here or other places that are actually giving good recognition to the BVI.
Yeah.
I love the fact that they were showing, I think Miss BVI was representing the country abroad.
Yeah.
And how well she did that.
And then we also had the Olympians as well.
The Olympians and that kind of thing. Yeah. But we have a lot of historic information or things that people have done in history from our territory or from our country that a lot of people are not aware of. So we need to expand the national heroes to include a lot of work. That's a great thing to me. An ambassador, like, wow, we got someone who, became an ambassador. We have, athletes, movies. There are a lot of people here in the diaspora that are doing things. We had the open heart surgery. I am going to work on, someone said that we should, someone that said, oh, well, we don't have enough hands, but I'm going to really begin to look at Doctors Without Borders, because I would love to see more of our doctors that are here in the diaspora connected to the island. And when there's certain things that need to happen, that we can pull from that pool, because, they may be here and feel like they're left out, or they are third or fourth generation. So there's no connection. So how do you bring them in and connect them back to the island? So that's what I would love to see more of. Heroes from the diaspora being represented.
Question for you, because it just triggered in my mind. I remember from reading history that there was, I think it was called the Virgin Islanders, the New York Virgin Islanders Association. I'm not too sure the correct name.
It's the freshwater. Yes, they are the freshwater Yankees, I think is what they call themselves. No, that was one. You're talking about the Virgin Garda. The probably. One from Virgin Garda. They're still there.
They're still around.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I know someone who's connected with them and invited me to a meeting. I'm not a Virgin Gardener, but through this person, I was invited to a meeting. So yes, I think that association is still around. Yeah,
that's still around. Yeah, and again, we need to have a Virgin Islander Association. Period. Because I don't know if it was the VG group, but I know there were those that were Anegadians that were were living in New York at the time. And when the petition was done to the UK about getting back the elected council, I think it was even back in 1938. They also sent a petition in 1949 with the march to say, we're making representation for whom that we support this move to have locally elected government back again. So definitely organization is a key part of that to consolidate what we have. And I love that idea about in terms of the skill set. I think, Gary, we talked about that last night. You want to do a database?
Yeah, actually, we had a kind of a indirect launch meeting today, actually this morning, where we had some diaspora members in the US and some from the UK, where we had a meeting actually today to kind of discuss forming a BVI diaspora network. And we had like a foundational meeting, a very first kind of a foundational meeting today.
Okay.
To kind of talk about the framework around how we want that to be, because you don't want to just have something. People want to have something that have some kind of structure in place and some understanding. Why am I taking part? Why am I going to get out of it? Right. So we had these discussions today. Once we get ourselves together, we kind of formed a little organization. So once it's official, we'll talk about it. So we're gonna have I think a follow up in January, because this was like our first meeting before the holidays. So I think it went well as far as what we want to see. We have a lot of good members who kind of founding members, I think, that want to make this happen. It kind of came off of the sustainability meeting, and we kind of off of that. And just because everybody's talked about tonight, connection. So I think one of the things that we're wanting to do is try to figure out what those connections are, whether we do that from a location point of view, whether we do it from, say, the UK and then the US separate, or we break out the US into separate little
and they have like chapters.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're still working through that, but that's one of the things that we started today, kind of figuring out how we want to go about doing that, because I think it's very important figuring out who's all out there. And one of the things we figured out is, how do I want to contribute? What kind of skill set do I want to bring in place? Things like that. Or how do I want to contribute? You may not be somebody who may be a student who could have ideas too that want to contribute to. So we want to be able to include everybody. Angelle says, she thumbs up, Angelle, yeah. We want to be able to include everybody in the diaspora, from young to old, who want to be able to contribute. Again, it may not be skill set, but you may have ideas of how you want the country to run and bring things like that too. Because as I stated before, I mean, one of the things that I did, well, it's not public yet. I'm still waiting for the official word from government. I partnered with a company, one of my old employers, to kind of help with the STEM program in the BVI. It was a five-year behind their back, trying to get them to do it, because when I first went to them, they were like, "Oh, the BVI is too small. They don't really do small countries." But I was persistent for 5 years. And actually, about a couple of months ago, they're like, "Okay, the BVI, we accept the BVI as part of it." So now we did a initial meeting with the government education department, so kind of give the idea and the format. So we're waiting to see what their decisions are to move forward. So things like that, where people have resources outside of the BVI, can bring things back home to make benefits, things like that I'm looking forward to.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm all for you, buddy. Let's go create an association. We have chapters all over the place. Because the thing for me now, when we talk about, there's that debate about the population and how we're outnumbered. We're not outnumbered. We need to reach out to the troops that are abroad, across the sea, wherever they may be. And again, they have a contribution to make, whether or not they are actually living on island. And making sure. So someone confirmed, Miss Gretchen, that's my good friend, that there was an OLA group. So she knows what I'm referring to, but it's no longer in existence. And the Virgin Gorda Association is still in existence. And I learned about them from working on the North Cyrus O'Neill Medical Center project, because I think they were a donor towards the furniture and the equipment for that facility. So that was one of the things I realized. I was like, oh, okay, that's good stuff. And again, they're out there, just as in long ago, they still sending money home, and that's a good thing. So I was happy to see that. What's one thing you want to see us be doing next year, as a country?
Me?
Yeah. And then we'll wrap up. We'll start with our wrap up.
I mean, as people talked about unity and things like that, so I think we just need to get back to our roots as far as that and culture. I think a lot of things that, some things I think people don't really understand where they come from. And sometimes when you don't understand where you come from, you start to fight and create issues because you don't understand. I know one of the things that I'm trying to do is kind of get more information about history. I'm kind of trying to understand things that I don't know. Like when I brought Benito Whitley onto my first thing, some of the things that he brought to the forefront, things that I didn't know about his grandfather, things that he did, like Grant Aid and stuff like that too, when we were celebrating for 40 years. Like, these are things that weren't taught to me.
Weren't taught in school.
Yeah, they weren't taught to me. So these are things that this is rich history that we have, that we don't know, that people went to the UK and said, you know what? We don't need your money anymore. We could be self-sufficient because we could do our own thing. People don't know that Virgin Islanders went and did those kind of things. People keep thinking in mind that the UK is always our mother. They're always there, always giving us stuff. No, at some point we went and told them, we don't need your aid anymore. We be self-sufficient. So from that history, which means that we are great people, we can do things.
Yeah.
But again, you need
And
to
that's
understand.
that, you know, and if we learn from our history, independence is a walk on the beach.
Right,
You
exactly.
understand? Because it took a lot of ingenious creativity, discipline, you know, whatever it is that is necessary for us to basically get to that place where you're able to balance your budget because you're generating enough revenue to cover your expenses and have a surplus. That's one of the key things that also needs to be mentioned. That when they did that, they actually had a surplus
Right.
because again there was discipline that had to be implemented. And you know, hats off to the late Honorable Willard Wheatley. He was the chief minister at the time that when the responsibility for financial management, because again financial management was the governor's responsibility, eh? So when that became part of the ministerial portfolio, that we were in charge of our finances, that we made a decision to say, well, yeah, we could sit here and enjoy the status quo. England is sending money every year, you know, let's spend it. Or obviously it came with strings. Or
Right.
we can say that, you know, we want to be able to chart our own destiny, and to be able to do that, we need to be able to manage our money. So if it's our money, then we can say what we want to do with it. So definitely look forward to hearing more about the initiatives that you're working on, and moving things forward. So however I can help from here, you be sure to let me know so that we can get this train moving and go from there.
Definitely.
Claudette, what's one thing you want to see? Oh no, we had you up. I think it was Angelle next. Yes, Miss Angelle, what do you want to see for your country in 2022?
I would like to see a new story told about our cultural heritage. I personally have a huge interest in those stories. But I realize a lot of my peers don't. And I think it would be really useful to create to summarize how we've gotten to where we are, what makes us so great, and then, you know, formulate a new story that can identify with the youth today. Something that's creative, something that can, you know, tap into what we're interested in, or like the talents that we have now. You know, a lot before, you know, things were based around manual labor, and, you know, like we had all these struggles. But, you know, my generation, we don't have those experiences. You know, being able to identify, you know, I might not be able to identify as well as like my dad can, or like, you know, my grandparents would have. You know, so finding something else that can bind us, you know, something I think about quite often.
Okay, we working through some technical difficulties. All right, while you're sorting that out, just real quick, somebody was asking, how did we start using the US dollar? Now, I read this in a book, actually I'm reading now, called The Virgin Islands Story, by Doctors Harrigan and Varlack, Norwell Harrigan and Dr. Paul Varlack. They were actually professors at university, well, it would have been College of the Virgin Islands at the time. And they created they did this book, and I realized they actually cut down a lot of what was in it, Gary. So we have a mission next year to go look for the original manuscript, right? Because it supposedly they had so much content, but you know, but from a cost standpoint, they couldn't publish the entire thing. But it did explain how we moved from actually the pound to the US dollar, and it was, I think it was officially probably late 50s. Don't quote me. I'm going to actually go back and put it up on the Facebook page after. But essentially, we were doing so much trade with the U.S. Virgin Islands. Again, they started off as the Danish. They were owned by Denmark. And then when, I think it was after World War I, that the United States bought them, that obviously their currency changed. And, you know, I was really surprised, even again, learning the history, Gary, you know, they're talking about sending down 10,000 heads of cattle a year to St. Thomas, you know, in the 60s and those types of times when we can't maybe find 5 cows now on island. But it's just amazing where we used to be at one point from an economic standpoint. So I think a decision, we were actually using both currencies. So depending on who you were trading with, if we were trading with the other British colonies, we would use the pounds, and then on the other side, it would be those. So it was using the both. But I'll update that. But people always have that question about how is it that we use US dollar instead of the pound, but we actually did have both of them at one point, and then switched out to and Eastern Caribbean. Okay, the EC. Yep. Okay, Angel, you good now? The
I think
computer
that was
sometimes has a
basically my
hold.
point. My train of thought is gone. So, but yeah, I think that was it.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Archer, what are your
Yes.
thoughts in terms of what do you want to see? I think you touched on this actually when you opened, in terms of what do you want to see differently for our country, and talking about the importance of us thinking about the next generation and what's in their best interest,
Well,
not just for now, but where should we be going in the next year? There's been talk about a national development strategy. In my observation, I haven't seen a level of engagement neither with Virgin Islanders abroad or locally in terms of really and truly what we want to see in our country in the next 10 to 20 years.
well, for us, I would want us to be a lot more open-minded, because unless we're open-minded to certain things and certain development opportunities, then we don't move forward too fast. Of course, a lot of this have to do with governance and the people that are making decisions in our lives. So yes, openness is important, because I would want to see us get into to something that could help us develop not only our mental capacity but the island and the culture and where we're been and where we're trying to get to. I don't think we have that vision, a 10-year, a 50-year vision in terms of where we trying to go. And if you don't have vision, then you fall in on the roadside, because then you get nowhere. And we have to start looking forward in the future, which is now, to investments. We can't just depend on on people giving us money, because we wouldn't grow. We have to, when we get $2, we have to invest at least 50 cents into a future, into something that's gonna give back. And I don't know how much of that we've been doing over the last 15, 20 years, because when we run into things like pandemic and we can't even afford to give someone a check to be able to survive. We can't, we can't do the little things to keep your head above water. Then it's troublesome for a country of this magnitude that have so much opportunities. And yes, education. We have to start educating people about the history, because unless you have a small little idea where this came from, you can't contribute to it the right way, first of all, and you can't appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was reading the book over my shoulder, Gary. So he's just touching, making reference on it.
I want to add a couple of things that what he just said kind of
Triggered a thought.
triggered, yeah, because so I think I don't even remember how long ago it was. Probably at least 20, gotta be at least 20 years ago. So I wrote a letter to the government, probably about 20 years ago. No, over 20 years ago. Kind of when I first went to college, because I was trying to think about a scholarship fund for students trying to get over to college, but it was for me, but for people behind me coming up. So I wrote to the government and told them, I said, we should kind of use the trust companies. I said, we have 400,000, 500,000 companies. What if we make them give $10 a year and put it in the fund just for scholarship education? And I did a whole 3-4 paragraph letter. I got back a one letter, a one sentence letter from the education department. We have enough education foundation in the BVI, and that was it.
And that was it.
I did a calculation. We would have had over 50, 60, 70 million dollars over the time just geared towards education. My thing was to just education, sports, and the arts.
Yeah.
And this would have been money that the government would not have had to take out of the tax money that would have been given to them generated separately. So my point is, when we have people who try to give ideas to, we don't have to, we shouldn't shut them down right away. And I think sometimes what happens is people, the diaspora, people who are away sometimes when they have ideas and trying to give ideas to the development of the country, some of us feel that we're shut down. You don't want to hear us because you're not living here anymore. You can't contribute any good ideas, or what you're saying is shut down, or maybe what you're trying to say might take my job because you're giving too much of a good idea. Things like this kind of short-minded thinking.
Feeling threatened.
Right, for no reason. So, when I just talked about that, kind of triggered that kind of thought about trying to focus when people are trying to do things for the benefit of the country and have that as the forefront.
And again, that's definitely one of the things that we have to change in the new year in terms of, the mindset towards the diaspora, that these are persons that should be considered part of the community. So whether it came from me or it came from you, Gary, and sitting on the scholarship committee, I could tell you, and as the viewer just mentioned, there's never enough funding for education. Whether it's to go towards teacher salaries, better buildings. We need a new high school right now. You talked about the STEM program, which is basically curriculum reform, where we want to put science, technology, engineering, and math into the system because it needs to get towards what the future jobs and careers are going to be, what we need people employed for, and how we move that forward. Because in my mind, how I view it, education is the limiter on the development of a country. If you don't educate your people, you could spend as much money as you want on infrastructure. The country is not going to go anywhere at the pace that it could go, because your greatest asset is your people. It's not the roads, it's not buildings, is all of that fancy stuff looks nice, but it's something that we really have to start to focus on. So I agree. Even if we took, let's say the government budget says that it's about 60 cents to every dollar comes out of financial services. So if we took 10 cents out of those 60 cents, you can imagine what our education system would look like.
Exactly.
And moving that forward. So I definitely agree. And again, we need to figure out, as part of the association that you guys are putting together, a think tank where concept papers, white papers are coming out that push certain things. So instead of just putting it to a department to make a decision like that, as in the interest of the country, that it goes out now to the wider community for their input and say, this is what we want. And then the public service is directed to give the public what it is we want to see, because that's definitely, one of those things that's needed. So, but guys, we are out of time, but I thank you ever so kindly for joining me tonight. And, feel free to reach back out and let's continue this conversation next year. Again, we're going to try to have a show at least once a month, honing in on specific topics or having a broad discussion similar to what we had tonight. So we want to do that. And I want to also leave with the word of encouragement. I actually used this in the last show, and I think it's still applicable for tonight's conversation, where the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, said people's participation, let's try this again. People's participation is the essence of good governance. And, I think all of what we said tonight, says that, yes, as a people, whether at home or abroad, it's essential to us having a well-governed country, and all of us have our part to play. So I am glad, and I'm sure you guys only represent a couple thousand more out there. We just have to find them, Gary. And I'm sure, as Miss Claudette is a prime example of 2-3 generations down the road, we will take you. That's okay. Once you have Virgin Islands blood in your veins, we part of the crew. So again, guys, thanks for being here. Have a great holiday. For those who've been tuning in on Facebook as well as YouTube, thank you for being here, as well as our listeners on CBN Virgin Islands 90 FM 90.9 for tuning in. We're gonna be taking a break for a few weeks, obviously, for the guava tat and the guava berry. And
you're gonna start that now. Don't start that now.
Yeah. I put it out there as the guava tat. That's the king. Yeah, we had some tart ones. But I tell you, the passion we put into those things, Gary, if we take that and put it into policy and social development and how we want to see our country move, I tell you, you wouldn't recognize a place in 10 years. Wouldn't recognize it, because that's where the energy needs to go towards it. And my friend here putting in her vote. I will let her put in her vote. I'm not gonna ask you how you feel, because we're gonna be here for the rest of the night. All right. So again, asking everyone to like our Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You guys can go back and share the video with all your friends and families for Christmas. Let them know what you're up to on a Thursday night and the week before Christmas. And on behalf of everybody, want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a prosperous 2002. And let's continue the change in conversation for a better Virgin Islands. Have a good night.